Welcome back, everyone. It's time to get to your questions for our guests today, State Representative Austin Badon and Kevin Pearson. And we've got a lot of really good questions. Here's one from one of our viewers who says, is it realistic that guns people already own could ever be confiscated? And we live in Louisiana. We're one of the most pro-gun states in the country. People love their guns here. They shoot as recreational sports. Right. That's a concern people have. Is it a realistic concern, though?
I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think it's a realistic concern.
No. Next question.
I think that, you know, what we're trying to address is not taking guns away from God-fearing, law-abiding citizens. We want to keep the guns away from people who are unstable, who have mental health issues, criminals, people who want to do other people harm.
Unless they're convicted felons, then yes, we do want to take the gun away from them.
Yeah, well,
as the law states, but not individuals. And I think that is one thing that at least the administration and virtually everyone does recognize, that the current guns, those that you have, whether they be, as the federal government's talking about, those that you have are okay, we just don't want any more. I mean, again, I have issues with that, but I mean, that's kind of the argument. Those that are there, those that have been purchased in the last months, are okay.
Yeah, you mentioned the administration. Let's bring up the 4 major legislative gun proposals that are being proposed by the president. First of all, he wants to have universal background checks for every gun buyer. He wants to crack down on gun trafficking, a ban on military-style assault weapons, and a ban on ammunition magazines with 10 or more bullets. Do you all have any disagreements with those, or are you on board with all of those?
I'm fully on board. I think they're a good start, and I think that the president is right on point with addressing some of these issues. And I don't think that any of these issues really cause harm or should cause fear to the actual legal gun owners.
And conversely, I mean, I would just say that, okay, if you're limiting the law-abiding citizen to 7 rounds in a magazine, a clip, not much into the gun lingo, you're doing that to the legal law-abiding citizen who now you've just underpowered them versus perhaps an assailant who doesn't care or pay any attention to this type of legislation. Because again, I think there was an issue in New York, as far as I believe, they passed a law that said you can carry no more than certain rounds in a gun,
right,
which is
7,
affecting the policeman. And the policeman may have 7 rounds in his gun, and then all of a sudden you have a criminal who is paying no attention to this, who has, many times that. Who are you going to feel more comfortable with in a firefight? You want to protect your first responders there and not taking power away from them, which seems to have been done.
Well, I know a little bit about firearms, and I was listening to the news one morning. We had a police officer who was shot in New Orleans, and they said the caliber of weapon that was used, and that was a .380 caliber pistol. And I know .380s don't come with a 14-round magazine. And when I heard that, I'm thinking, this guy actually had an illegal magazine, or he adapted a magazine. Generally, a .380 semi-automatic pistol comes with roughly 7 to 8 or 9 rounds in it, but his had 14. So he obviously made a conscious effort to add more bullets into his weapon.
Right.
Subsequently, a police officer was shot, and I think another one was injured as well. And you have people who are making a conscious effort to go about retrofitting their weapons, and that's just not something that we need to have. They're obviously doing it for a criminal intent.
Do you think this debate is really centering around what the real problem is? I mean, when you look at the people who are killing, who are doing the killing, the majority of the people who are doing the killing, we're not talking about law-abiding citizens here.
Right. I have to agree with that. And I mean, something in the president's, what he was discussing was more funding for police, and not just police at schools. I mean, police in communities. I mean, I think New Orleans has seen a reduction in funding for police from the federal level, considerable. I believe Mayor Landrieu talked about that, and that is on the forefront. Those police officers in those communities, in those local areas, I think they do have an effect. I mean, we have fortunately seen the rate of violent crime decline. I think most people agree generally over the last decade. I mean, the statistics seem to bear that out, and that is good news. Now, get the police, fund, police. somehow we need to have more police protection in New Orleans and in many of these areas where the problem is concentrated.
Well, just to weigh in, it almost seems like, I'm old enough to remember the Cold War and Star Wars, and it's just like, let's arm our police, let's make sure there's plenty of police, and that may be exactly what needs to be done. One thing that I have read and researched is everybody's talking about what's the problem, how to fix the problem, and what about guns in schools, and what about this, and what about that. One issue that I think is clear is there's not been very much study of this, and research on the national level and on the local level has not been funded very well at all. And the NRA has been against funding this, and the researchers in the postgraduate programs are being told, if you want to do research in that, you better have a second job because there's not funding for it. So what about getting some research done on this, some funding to find out, is more guns in schools better? Is more police better? Is a combination better? Or maybe after doing the research, we find out there's yet another way to go.
Well, I think the president has addressed that in two different aspects. One, he has given more flexibility to local communities through getting grants to be able to address, the gun issue, especially with the at-risk youth in the communities. Another way he's addressed it is he's actually said that, schools and school systems should have more flexibility as to how they are going to secure their facilities. I think he's even gone so far as to say that maybe we should have maybe 1,000 officers, security officers, armed security officers who are going to be in the schools. So he has really taken the first step to start addressing it. But I think it goes back to your original question, is this the root of the problem? In my opinion, no, it's not the root of the problem. The root of the problem is we are glorifying weapons, we are glorifying the killing of human beings through video games, through movies and television. When you look at entertainment and someone gets shot and killed, they get up and they make another television show or they make another movie. In real life, it doesn't happen. And all of these killings, there's someone's child, there's someone's baby. We need to do everything in a bipartisan manner to address this on the streets of Louisiana as well as throughout the country.
Well, let's talk a little bit about what might happen during the session that starts in April. I mean, I know that this is a fiscal-only session, but there are certainly going to be some proposals made concerning gun control. But one thing, if we go back just a little bit, during the last session, there was the whole constitutional amendment concerning guns and this whole idea of strict scrutiny now. That did pass overwhelmingly by the public. Representative Pearson, you voted in favor of that. Yes. Representative Badon, you voted against that. So tell us, how does that influence where things go from this point on?
I think, it certainly, as it passed the voters in excess of 70%, I think it was a statement that said we do want protection of our constitutional First Amendment, Second Amendment rights. We don't believe that the government should be stepping in to take away any of those rights, and we simply want that subject to the highest level of scrutiny. We don't just want someone to go in the legislature and say, hey, we're just going to pass this bill that's going to be deemed constitutional. If it does pass, if it goes before the courts can look at it and see if there was really a valid, logical reason to do it, as opposed to just because we wanted to or someone felt that it was important.
Representative Badon?
My city, New Orleans, is considered the murder capital of the free world. And I couldn't vote for anything that was going to potentially put another firearm in the hands of anyone who could cause more havoc on the streets of New Orleans. I didn't want to take away people's gun rights, but I wanted to protect the citizens of our states, and our state, and I wanted to make sure that government still had some mechanism that we could address any further issues as far as gun rights in the future.
But in fact, it's a little bit more difficult for you to do that because this constitutional amendment is now in place. Is that right? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, it would be more difficult to pass any laws affecting the ownership of guns in Louisiana due to that.
And so where does that leave us in the end in this whole debate, and really what you all will be able to accomplish? Any concerns there?
Well, I think you have a lot of concerns because now, this is a huge issue, and we have to, as legislators, we have to work together to enact some laws that will do some things in a different manner. I mean, what we've been doing, you know, in the past has not been working to stop the violence, stop the proliferation of guns in the street. I remember going to a gun show, and I overheard one guy tell another guy he just bought a rifle without a background check. And he saw me look at him, and I felt compelled to say something. And by the time I got back with an authority, those guys had left. But they were bragging about how they went to a gun show and they spent money and without a background check, and they walked out with a firearm. I have no idea who the background or what the background of these individuals were, but they were able to do that. Now there's a firearm on the streets of Louisiana that was bought really illegally.
Any concern about that? Do you think that there should be background checks for anybody and everybody who purchases a gun, whether at a gun store or at a gun show? Well,
I think there are at gun stores, there are background checks. And I don't know if this was a licensed dealer that was selling at the gun show. If it was, I think he was in violation. And again, he is selling a gun legally, and that does need to be dealt with if he is doing that, if he's a licensed dealer selling.
The laws just need to be enforced, which would address that problem. That's what you're saying.
Right, because again, a rifle, we're not talking here about taking away the abilities of individuals to have rifles. I mean, we're not talking about that. We're talking about, in that particular case, if he was buying one from a licensed firearms dealer, if the dealer did not follow, you know, the law by that, then he's in violation.
We'll get another question from a viewer who says, how about mandatory gun safety classes for gun ownership? What do you think about that?
I like that idea. I think that's a very good idea. I like that idea. In my district, I was able to have a lot of gun locks sent to my area, and I was offering them to my constituents or whoever wanted them, and a number of people did come and pick them up. But I like the idea of mandatory safety classes. And as an outdoorsman and a hunter in Louisiana, we have to take hunter safety classes before we can obtain a hunter's license. So I think that would be something that we need to take a good look at.
Another question.
But let me just get back on that, though. But I mean, so your law-abiding citizens now are going to say, okay, let me go do this gun safety course and pay for it, but the criminals are going to be probably not.
Well, part of that, though, is a lot of the guns that are on the streets are there because they were in someone's home and someone broke in, or they were left in a car. Maybe if they took a gun safety course, through that education they would learn how to secure the weapon or put it someplace where it would be more difficult for it to be stolen. Because you see it all the time where these guns are legally obtained by someone, but yet they end up on the street because people left them in a car or they were broken into their home.
So you would be for it, but Representative Pearson, it sounds like you would be a little bit hesitant to make that mandatory.
Yes, clearly. I mean, again, you're talking about an issue where you're trying to have everyone who has a gun, may have been in the military 20 years ago or anything. I mean, so where are we going to go with this? Wow. I mean, where is the right level? Let's see. Jack was in the military for 25 years, and now he's required by law to have a gun safety course. He's very familiar with that. And I don't know what is the responsibility of government.
But it just may help prevent an accident.
I hate to stop this part of the conversation, but we are totally out of time. Okay. That is it for our show. Thank you both so much for being on, Representative Pearson and Representative Badon. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Everyone, don't forget to get in touch with us by Twitter, by Facebook, and by email. And remember to check out jrpoa.com to watch whole episodes of the show and to get great legal information about all topics discussed. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.